Hello, good morning. Welcome to this week's episode of Learn with Lorna, episode number 185. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I am the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service, which has 4 archive centres in the Highlands of Scotland, where we look after the historic documents relating to this part of the world. We have a centre in Inverness, one in Fort William, one in Portree, and one in Wick. And this week we are looking at a collection held in Inverness in the Highland Archive Centre. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very, very grateful for that. And if anyone is donating through our website, if you're a UK resident, could I ask that you would also add gift aid onto that? It means we get an extra 25% of that donation, which makes a huge, substantial difference to us. So welcome to this week's episode about a collection that we are delighted to have, as we are with all of them, of course, but delighted to have recently finished cataloguing the Fraser of Lovat collection. This is an extensive collection of records relating to one of the most significant and prominent families in Highland history, the main line of Clan Fraser. The collection dates from 1744 through to 2021 and extends over 60 linear metres, containing a huge amount of information about the Lovat estates and members of the Fraser family. So huge thanks here to my colleague Colin. Colin was one of our archivists who retired a few years ago, and since his retirement has been volunteering for us, cataloguing several collections, and has spent years of work cataloguing and pulling together the Lovat Estates collection for public access. So very many thanks to Colin. It can be a very long process to catalogue a collection, particularly a collection like this, and to make it accessible for people to be able to use while we retain control of what's there and how we manage it. So we're very grateful that this has been one of Colin's retirement projects. And it was completed just in time for some visitors who you may have seen on our Facebook page came across from Brazil to look at this collection over the last few weeks, and I'll talk more about that as we go on. So what is in this collection? Who are the Frasers of Lovat? Whereabouts in the Highlands are we talking about, and why is this collection so significant? Well, I'm going to start, as I sometimes do, with an overview of the collection taken from our own administration history. I've said before, we write an admin history of a collection when we pull it together and create the catalogue that gives a description of how the collection was brought together and who has created those records. So this is our admin history. The Scottish feudal lordship of Lovat has been held by the Fraser family since the 13th century. The title Lord Lovat was created in 1458 when Hugh Fraser was summoned to the Scottish Parliament as Lord Fraser of Lovat. The title descended in a direct line until the death of the 9th Lord in 1695, who was succeeded by his great-uncle. In 1697, the 10th Lord's son, Simon Fraser, known as Simon the Fox, the Old Fox, kidnapped and forcibly married the late 9th Lord's widow and fled to France. Fraser was convicted in absentia and sentenced to death. However, he supported the government against the Jacobite risings of 1715 and was rewarded with a pardon for his crimes. In 1730, he won a litigation confirming his title as Lord Lovat. But, as many of you will know if you know the story of that particular Lord Lovat, ups and downs and twists and turns, and that Lord Lovat participated in the 45 against the Crown and was therefore sentenced to death. He was beheaded on the 9th of April 1747 and the Lovat estates were forfeited to the Crown. In 1774 the estate were restored to the Fox's son, General Simon Fraser, on whose death in 1815 they passed to Thomas Fraser of Strichen, who was reinstated as the 12th Lord Lovat in 1854. And we can see from that point that Thomas Fraser of Strichen took on the Lovat line, the Lovat titles. We can see that the Lovat estates become much more formally managed, and we see much more standardised record keeping, financial accounting systems, and so on. And the Lovat estates continue to be managed on behalf of the current Lord Lovat, also Simon Fraser. The Lovat estates, which today comprise dozens and dozens of properties, farmland, woodland and estate grounds, are situated predominantly in and around Bewley and the Aird, and is still a substantial estate, still an important estate, but reduced since the 1990s when the land ownership of the estate had to be reduced. So it's a family with a long recorded heritage, but also a family with some very fascinating individuals who have influenced the course not only of Highland history, but also wider history across the country. You might remember Lorna episode 77, which looked at the life and letters of the Old Fox, ending with his execution for fighting against the government in 1745. And that's where I'm going to start this episode, with the Old Fox, because the first two documents in this collection relate to his execution. And when I say that they relate to his execution, you'll see just how closely they relate. One was written by Lovat when he was in the Tower of London on the day of his execution. And I found it hard to even imagine when I was looking at this document, when you're holding a document like this, to contemplate what's going through someone's mind as they're standing in the Tower of London on the day of their execution, waiting for that to happen. But he sounds, as anyone who's familiar with the Old Fox, he sounds typically ebullient. This is what he says in this final kind of speech he's written in the Tower of London. As it may be reasonably be expected that I should say something of myself in this place, I declare that I die a true but unworthy member of the Holy Catholic Apostolic Church. As to my death, I cannot but look upon it as glorious, seeing as I fall a sacrifice to the tyrannical laws of this country, which ought to have no jurisdiction over me by the Articles of Union, so that I die a victim for my principles, for my king, and for my country. I sincerely pardon all my enemies, persecutors, and slanderers from the highest to the lowest, whom God forgive as I heartily do, and I die in perfect charity with all mankind. I sincerely repent of all my sins and firmly hope to obtain pardon and forgiveness for them through the infinite mercy of Almighty God and the mercy and passion of my blessed Lord and Redeemer Jesus Christ, into whose hands I recommend my soul. Amen. Lovat. Written in the Tower, April the 9th, 1747. As I say, it's quite extraordinary to hold those things in your hand and think about the moment that they were written. But the other document records a moment even nearer to his end. This is a document which notes down some of his final words to William Fraser, who was a writer to the signet. My dear William, I deliver to you this cane as my last token and testimony of the sense I have of your faithful services and your singular friendship, and as a further token and symbol of my leaving with you all the power of my worldly affairs. So I bid you, my dear William, a hearty adieu, and God Almighty bless you and yours. Simon Lovat, to W. Fraser, on the scaffold, 1747. It's extraordinary, isn't it? It's absolutely extraordinary. If you haven't already watched Lorna 77, please do, because the story of his life is absolutely extraordinary. Now, the Old Fox goes by many nicknames, like the Old Fox, like the Great Leviathan, but he's sometimes referred to as the Last Highlander, and that's the title of Sarah Fraser's biography of him. And I got a sense when I was looking at this collection of that change, of that move away from what you might see as the typical Highland kind of clan structure, which was already very, very much crumbling by this point. But as I mentioned, Lovat was executed and the Lovat estates were forfeited to the crown. And they were restored to his son in 1774, but in 1815, when he died, they passed, after some legal wrangling, to a different branch of the family, the Frasers of Strichen, with Thomas becoming the next Lord Lovat. And we see at this point, so I mentioned there that feeling of the last Highlander and that end of an era. And we see at this point a change in the record keeping in this collection. So things become visibly more formal. There are papers relating to the Strichen estates and the Strichen line prior to coming over, taking over the Lovat title. So for instance, there are correspondence and accounts of Alexander VII of Strichen, one of the first agriculturalists to use artificial fertiliser. So there you go. Alexander VIII of Strichen and Alexander IX of Strichen. So they are the father, grandfather and great-grandfather of the Thomas who would become Lord Lovat when that line switched. It's the same in all of these kind of prominent landed families that you see this naming pattern of the repetition of names. So lots of Alexander Frasers in the Strichen line, lots and lots of Simons in the Lovat line. As I said, the current Lord Lovat is a Simon Lovat. And these early letters and accounts give you some brilliant insights into everyday costs, everyday life, journeys, and so on. So, for instance, there are papers relating from the 1720s relating to expenses of the Countess of Bute, who was married to Alexander Fraser VII of Strichen. And I had a great time looking through these. There's bundles and bundles of them. So, for instance, we can see that in April 1727, 12 shillings was paid to the smith's servants who made the grate for the tomb at Rothsay. We can see that she paid 8 shillings to the carters for drink money when they helped her move her baggage from the abbey, or £3 1 shilling for horn combs, powders and other materials. We can see purchases including barrels of herring, payments to the pastry school, all sorts of things. A lot of payments for drink money for people. Moving forward a wee bit, we can see documents from the 1740s that reveal the sort of food that were being purchased by these members of the Frasers of Strichen. And they're really fascinating. So we can see that on the 26th of March 1740, Lord Strichen was ordering items including onions, London leeks, orange carrots, green peas. Really interesting, those references to the colours from the purple carrots that might have been around as well. Early Hotspur peas, marrows, Windsor beans, spinach, lettuce, cabbage, winter savoury, shallots, kidney beans, sweet marjoram and a barrel of red clover. We can also find lists of the washing that they had done, shifts, stockings, short gowns, tablecloths and what the costs were. So these are fascinating bundles of documents. They really would be worth, if you're in the area, just come in and order up one of these bundles and just flick through it and see the sort of things that people are paying for and what they're doing. They just shed light on so many aspects of life. I then got lost for a while in the papers of Thomas Alexander Fraser, who was the 10th of Strichen and became the 12th Lord Lovat when that line passed over, and his wife Charlotte. I found within this some brilliant letters written by Thomas Frederick Fraser. Now, what's his first name? He has an alternate first name. To whom the title could have passed if it hadn't gone to the Strichen line. And that's because this was Archibald, that's the name, Archibald Thomas Frederick Fraser. The line, his father had been illegitimate. And so I don't know if that's the main reason, but one of the reasons possibly that the line didn't pass down to him, but went instead to Strichen. But there are some brilliant letters from Archibald Thomas Frederick Fraser. Lots of letters written by him to his grandparents, Colonel Archibald Campbell Fraser of Lovat and his wife Jane. And these letters were written by the young boy from about the age of 10 or 11 onwards. I'll maybe share a couple of the images I'm going to talk about today after I've finished, because the handwriting is mind-blowing. I mean, I see a lot of handwriting and I see a lot of beautiful handwriting, but this handwriting for a boy of 11, also extraordinary content like this. So he was about 12 when he wrote this. From Aberdeen, March the 28th, 1812. Now bear in mind, as I said, that his father had been illegitimate, an illegitimate son of Lovat. It becomes apparent that he's aware of that through the writing. So, like I say, here about age 12. My dear Grandpapa, I hope soon to hear that you and my grandmamma are well. I wrote to you some weeks ago, and since that time I have commenced reading the commentaries of the celebrated Caesar in the original, and also I think it is since then that I began reading Mayer's Introduction to Writing in Latin. Having finished the examples in Hamilton's Arithmetic in proportion, I am going through those in the same author's larger works, which is called An Introduction to Merchandise. I have read through the History of Aberdeen in 2 volumes, which I bought for myself, and having no other history book to read. Mr. Bentley got me Mavor's History of Rome in 3 small volumes, on the condition that I should pay for it myself if you do not grant it to me. I wish to send by the bearer of this, Mr. John Fraser, the History of Aberdeen for you and my grandmamma to read, if you should have wished, but his things were gone before I knew. The last book I read was the History of Sandford and Merton, which I had a loan of from Dr. Dingwall of Fordyce. I had much pleasure in reading it, and I hope some profit. I am now wearing my best coat every day, but I hope soon to have a new one. Mr. Bentley is rather indisposed at present with a cold, but the rest of the house is very well. Mr. and Mrs. Bentley desire to offer best respects to you and to Grandmamma, with my love to Grandmamma. I am your most dutiful and affectionate grandson. So, an extraordinary young man. What about this one? This one was written the same year, so again about age 12. Dear Grandpapa, for considerable time I have been impressed with the propriety of writing to you, but have been prevented by different causes, among which the urgency of my studies is not least. Another, which I hope you will sustain as some excuse for my silence, has been the favourableness of the weather for going abroad when I had a little leisure time. I have also been making a number of excursions with Mr. and Mrs. Bentley to see some of their friends in this neighbourhood. It is with pleasure that I at length take my pen up to write to you and return to you my most grateful thanks for giving me the opportunity of seeing you and my grandmamma, and for the numerous and great indulgences and pleasures I enjoyed during our late visit with you. It would be flattering myself too much to suppose you had studied my gratification in everything attending the visit, but I am sure that if you had done so, the end could not have been more effectually accomplished. The many great marks of your and my amiable grandmamma's affection have exceedingly endeared you to me, and made impressions on my heart which no length of time can possibly efface. The stay at Beaufort renewed and re-impressed on me the recollection of many happy days spent there in your society. The handsome addition you made to my pocket money has enabled me to procure a very costly but ornamental and useful article of study, named Strauss's Stream of Time, which is a sort of map or a pictured delineation of the history or chronology of all the kingdoms and states from the beginning of the world to the present time. It cost 34 shillings, but I hope that you will not condemn this purchase when I tell you that it was not made without the approbation of 3 of the literati of Aberdeen, viz. My constant friend and adviser, Mr. Bentley, Dr. Hamilton and Professor Glennie. It was in the house of Mr. Thompson of Bankery, grandson of Dr. H., where I first saw this curious performance. But the highest honour of all that you have conferred upon me is that of calling me by and allowing me to assume your own name. I hope it will be a stimulus to me never to sully an appellation that has been borne by so distinguished a character. And I just thought I would read the whole thing because his style of writing at the age of 12 is extraordinary. And of course he would have been very well educated, but I think it shows the precariousness of his relationship. He's aware of the illegitimacy. He's grateful that his grandparents are investing time in him and supporting him, because I think he's aware that they could choose not to. There are also letters from his tutor, James Bentley, updating Lovat on his grandson's progress. He says he's often in fine health and spirits and going on steadily in his learning. And there are letters back from Lovat and Lady Lovat, saying that his letters do him great honour, and they hope that his writing and his words will be heard in heaven. And in 1814, there are letters from the 13-year-old, that boy when he was 13, commenting on all the bells ringing everywhere for the defeat of Bonaparte and also for Wellington's victory. So it's quite extraordinary to see a young man's take on those events. His tutor, writing to Lovat, says, "What a few days has done for the political, social and moral state of the world. We can hardly think or speak of anything but the great events and revolutions that have taken place in France. They have taken place in France, but they will certainly affect the whole world." He also says, in a really interesting bit that I didn't have time to pursue and go into, Bentley says to Lovat, or says to Lady Lovat, "As Archibald is now well on the way to manhood, he should be entrusted with the seal that you have kept for him, that you kept until he should ask for it. He is now at an age where I think he can be entrusted with it." And I could have chosen any number of these letters. He talks about his gratitude for getting a piano, his canary, and how he wants to take his canary to Beaufort Castle because he thinks Lovat would like it. His ability to conjure up Beaufort in his mind. He talks about the Lovat estates and how he can picture them and what they mean to him. But of course, I only had time to select a couple and we need to move on to another generation. The family part of this collection then goes on to include correspondence and records from across the 1800s and into the 1900s from various generations of this family. So there are documents including diary entries, so they're written out longhand like letters, but they kind of act as a diary of a journey around Europe. There's a poem from Burns, contemporary poem from Burns. Don't know if it's in his hand or not, but it is so erotic that I would absolutely be immediately banned from the internet if I tried to read it out loud. It was being passed around the staff, who have all raised an eyebrow at it. That's all I can say here. You'll have to come in and have a look. There are also a wide variety of other letters, vouchers and receipts, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, so you can see why I can only sample small sections of them to tell you about it. But there are papers also relating to another fascinating member of the family, Simon Fraser, 14th Lord Lovat. Now I say that in kind of quotation marks because the numbering of the Lord Lovats is always, the family traditionally didn't recognise the time that the title was attainted. So there's a mismatch with the numbering sometimes. But generally he gets called Simon Fraser, the 14th Lord Lovat, who raised and commanded the Lovat Scouts during the Boer War. And again, if you're interested in that, there's a Learn with Lorna on the history of the Lovat Scouts. He was appointed a Knight of the Thistle in 1915, amongst a whole load of other titles, and he served in the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders. He was also the first chairman of the Forestry Commission, which was formed after the First World War. And he took that interest and ability in land management with him into pursuits across the world, including in Sudan and in Brazil. And in 1924, as part of the Montague mission, this Lord Lovat went to Brazil to explore potential investments, ultimately setting up the Piranha Plantation Limited and its subsidiary company. Now, I don't speak Portuguese, so Companhia de Terras Norte do Piranha, something like that. And this company was responsible for a variety of things, including extending the railway, being responsible for real estate opportunities across that region, and the company constructed, I think, around 60 cities in Brazil. And I was absolutely unaware of this, or unaware of the extent of this, until I chatted with two researchers who are viewers of Learn with Lorna, so I'm sure Letty and Alexandra will pick this up. And they had come from Brazil to research this because they work for the company. It's the company's 100th anniversary, and they had come to look in the Lovat collections for references to this Simon Fraser. And so there are papers, family papers, letters and correspondence relating to this. But to link in, by far the largest part of this collection, of the Lovat Estates collection, relates to land management at home. So I've mentioned so far family papers, letters and so on, but the bulk of this collection relates to the management of the Lovat Estates and associated concerns of the Lovat estates, including those ones in Brazil and Sudan. There are over 300 letter books and files in this collection. Now, I don't know if you've ever had cause to work with or look at letter books, but letter books contain like very, someone out there will be able to tell me what the word is, gone out of my head, very thin, like tracing paper. So these are the books that record letters that have been outgoing, and they have been blotted, written, and a copy retained within the letter books. And so because the paper is so thin, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters within any of these books. And then there are hundreds of books. And those are the outgoing letters from the estate, but then there are, thank you Fiona, carbon copy. And there are also files recording the letters coming into the estates as well, from the family, from Lord Lovat, but also from estate factors and managers. And a look through the indexes show letters to suppliers, businesses, manufacturers, workers, companies across the country and further afield. And what I kind of took from this, although it's something I know, is it really showcases, a flick through the indexes of these letter books really showcases the number of roles that a large estate fulfilled, that one of the landowners fulfilled, and also the factors of the estates, how many hats these guys are wearing and the functions that estate is providing for the local community. So we can see frequent correspondence with the JPs, with the police, with other estates, with investors, with financial companies and financial concerns across the world. And these estate letter books, they date from 1821 to 1956, and they contain a huge amount of information, including about, as I mentioned, those plantations in Brazil and Sudan. So, for instance, there's a letter from the 23rd of April 1924 that notes or acknowledges the dispatch of engine and boiler plans to Brazil to accompany the items that have been sent by ship from Liverpool. But that, looking at something so kind of exotic about their work in an entirely different country, sits alongside a letter to Thomas Puller of the Muirvord Golf Club about letting the Boys Brigade use storage spaces. Or just so many different examples. And it's in those letter books that I got some of the content for that episode on the Lovat Scouts, because the estate records will talk about the preparations for the Scouts being formed, but also when they returned. So this is a letter sent from the factor, Garioch, he appears a lot in these records, written to Lord Lovat in 1901. And it notes, amongst other things, we expect the Scouts to arrive about the 14th or 16th of August. I wrote to Lord Tweedmouth on the subject of their disbandment, and he has wired me that they will be disbanded at Beaulieu, and that General Hunter will forward instructions. I have not yet heard from the General. Lochiel and Provost McBain have issued a joint appeal for funds for the reception. And then he finishes saying to Lord Lovat, the reception will be historic, but it will be robbed of an amount of enthusiasm on account of your lordship's absence. And that's because he was still in South Africa for the Boer War. But the factor's voice is dominant through these collections, the people running and managing the estates, but also heard in various other record types. So there are factors' annual accounts, which start in 1815, factory ledgers with abstracts and cash books, and again, extensive correspondence files particular to the factors' work. And they deal with things like job applications, stock, produce on the estate. And again, they show the influence that was in the factors' hands as well as in the landowners' hands. So for instance, in 1908, Annie Lundy writes to Garioch in his role as factor. He's factor the Lovat Estates, but she writes to him in his role as Kirkhill School Board, member of the school board, asking for his influence in helping her get a job in the local school. There's a letter from a William Fraser writing from the Borough Police Chambers in Dumbarton, thanking Garioch for using his influence with the Inverness Town Council to support his application for the post of Chief Constable. So you can really see the number of things an estate is involved in. but this was my absolute favourite one from this bundle. High Street, Clachnahary, Inverness, 28th of October 1908. To Garioch Esquire, Lovat Estates Office, Bewley. Dear Sir, my brother-in-law, who is applying for an old age pension, cannot give satisfactory evidence of his age or the year of his birth, beyond that he remembers being told he had been born on the same day as the late Lord Lovat, the present Lord Lovat's father. I shall be much obliged by your informing me when the late Lord Lovat was born. I have to apologise for troubling you, but I have failed to ascertain this information from any other source. Your obedient servant, John Callum, blacksmith. I just loved that someone would go, I mean, it was the same day as Lovat. So they've gone, okay, well, we'll have to ask the estate when Lovat was born so that we can work out when you were born. But I want to finish this episode by talking about something that I know will be of interest to many of people who are watching, and that is the estate's rental records. There are rentals in this collection for the Strichen estates and for the Lovat estates. They date for Lovat from 1816 to 1968. They have a 75-year closure on them, and that's because, of course, they contain private details of people who are living in the estate. So records will only be accessible if they're older than 75 years ago. Now, these rentals, they vary, of course, for the different dates, but they record the tenants occupying the various crofts and houses on the Lovat estates in the parishes of Kilmorrock, Kiltarlity, Kirkhill, Boleskine, Abertarf, North Morar, and many of them also have indexes. So a brilliant resource for people tracing family members who lived and work on the estate. And in a fantastic turn of events, these rentals can also be located, because the one thing I haven't yet spoken about are the maps and plans. There are hundreds of maps and plans in this collection dating from the 1750s onwards. There are maps of the estate lands, the estate boundaries, of individual farms, of hill pastures, of the graves in Bewley Priory, maps and plans of villages, of the bits of the estate that were annexed after the Jacobite risings. There are plans of so many things, and like I say, literally hundreds of enormous plans. And some of them include the rental properties with their numbers. So you could look in the rental volume, you could find the name and the number of the croft that somebody was resident in, and then you can plot it on the map. And that's really a relatively uncommon thing for us to be able to do. And now, although we hold those original maps and plans at Hark, we don't issue them because it sounds negative, but it's not at all negative, because when they came to us, they were all digitised in high resolution, and they can all be searched on the National Library of Scotland website, which I imagine now everybody is away to do after this episode. So if you just type into search engine National Library of Scotland Lovat maps, you will get a whole swathe of the maps that I've been talking about. So there you are, a whistle-stop tour through a large and very significant collection, which we are delighted to care for. Do come in and have a look through. Do go and look at Lovat maps online. And do go and check out Lovat Estates' website, because they'll give you more information now about what the estate concerns are, what their focuses are, still very much on woodland and land management and so on. So please do go down all those different alleys. But I hope that you're able to come in and have a look at these records at some point, because it is the most phenomenal collection. So thank you for joining me. I can't believe only 4 minutes over when I've talked about Lovat. That's quite extraordinary. So please do join me next week. Next week we will be returning to a collection that I've looked at previously, the Davidson collection held in Nucleus, but looking at entirely different aspects of that collection. We are now into the last week, the last month before we take the summer break. So we'll be finishing at the end of May, starting back up again in September. So I hope you can join me next week. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we are very, very grateful for that. Thank you very much for your time and your company this morning.